It's time for another board recap podcast. How are you today, Dr. Smith?
Great, kind of warm outside. We had
It is a little warm, yes.
several great days of really fall-like weather, and now we've returned to the heat index of above 100.
It's dried out, gotten a little hot on us, but
It-
fall is not far away. September's going to be here before we know
We
it.
hope,
in
it's the
October.
fourth week of school already.
I know, that is hard to believe. Yeah,
It
we're
is very hard to believe.
sailing through. So let's sail into last night's board meeting agenda, if
All
you
right.
will. We had another school board meeting, and so we'll start as we always do with good news. Recently, we posted a podcast with Dr. Andy Owen, Dr./Coach Owen, if you will, and he and I just talked about upcoming fall sports season. We say this every time. I know you enjoy fall sports, but so many athletes. We think football, of course, out of the gate, but boy, do we have a lot of high school athletes dedicated and coaches this time of year.
Certainly do, and hats off to them.
Yes.
Bossy had their 100th anniversary celebration.
That was special.
Friday
You got
night.
to be a part of that.
It was very special, along with Mike Duckworth and Melissa Moore, two great board members and two Bossy alums.
Yes.
And I kind of count myself in that
Right?
area too, because I was blessed to teach there for 11 years.
You even
But
had on a jacket, I believe, from your
I
Bossy
sure did,
days.
yeah. About a 40-year-old jacket.
Yeah.
Still, I'm going to say it. But anyway, but the band, they're somewhat small, but man, they're going to go places.
Yeah.
Incredibly complex drill and music, executing incredibly well this beginning part of the season. Sounded great, looked great. So hats off to the pride of Bossy. And then also
Absolutely.
I made a point to talk to the cheer sponsor.
Oh, it's everyone.
Those cheerleaders were
Yes.
incredible. Just great kids. They were it was
So many moving parts,
joyful.
so many people
Right.
involved. I think I told you I was at a North tennis match recently for my
Yes.
nephew, and just the excitement there where they were competing against an out-of-county
Yeah.
team, and just so many fans there and family, and
Yeah.
what a great opportunity for all of our high school students, whether you're the athlete or you're helping with the team or
Right.
you're coach or cheerleading, what have you. It's a great time of year.
Absolutely.
All right, moving through then good news last night. Also, we had shared a post as we do frequently. This was from our Southern Indiana Career and Tech Center. And if you were a dog lover and you saw the pictures or an animal lover, you saw that their vet tech program brought in some real live animals. And actually, we're doing work with anatomy and some of the animal terminology. But it was great to see that hands-on learning taking place. And we say this all the time. You may not realize that we have veterinary science out at our Career and Tech Center. What a great program.
Yes, and we should probably say no animals were hurt in the filming.
That is
But
correct.
they are also not live. Those are stuffed animals.
Correct. But I also have seen in the past they brought in live animals as well.
Yes, I just wanted
yes, to
those that
clarify.
are actually watching the
Yes.
podcast. I wanted them
You are
to make
correct
certain
about
that
that.
we knew the difference between
Yes,
Uh,
correct.
inanimate object. and
That is
live animal.
right. So, nonetheless, great program and something you may not even realize may be taking
Yeah.
place out at SICTIC.
And that's the important part.
Yes, for sure. We also did a video recently to highlight just where we're at with the new statewide wireless communication device, the change in that and what it amounts to. Really, for a lot of people, they'll say, well, that means no more cell phones. And, getting the opportunity to talk to a lot of our high school students, just a real positive vibe around this. And it's refreshing to hear our own students saying, you know what, kind of like this. And I think it helps me to be a better student and actually develop more friendships and talk to my friends.
Yeah. No, I think it's gone exceedingly well.
Yeah. And kudos to our schools because, it's a big change just with teachers
Right.
and everyone, just making sure that goes well. And it has gone
Well,
well.
schools and also families, because we can't do that without the
You are
support
right.
of families and parents. So thank you, parents.
Absolutely. Also, food and nutrition, they
Yeah,
actually have
love
their
this.
They have their own social media page. If you don't follow it on Facebook, you should. EVSC Food and Nutrition. Then they frequently post pictures of just their food, and they have a very good awareness, just like restaurants do. The more appealing, the more visual they are in presenting their food, the more students are going to want to eat it. And they've done some posts. We've shared it, but if you're looking at that, if you've seen that, really does make you to have an appreciation for the food being served in our school
It
cafeterias.
does. And I had lunch not that long ago, but I'm starting to be hungry again.
Absolutely. And I love the food service worker there with a big smile on her face. What a valuable part of the EVSC team they are.
You bet.
And then moving through good news, you already talked about this, the Bossy High School. I want to make sure if people didn't hear you say this, you all were there because it is the centennial. Bossy High School is celebrating this year being their 100th year. I don't think you'll find a more beautiful high school facility in the state of Indiana. And, when you talk about that facility, we just put new turf fields in and a new stadium on Enlow, or new roof on Enlow Stadium. Looks fantastic.
It does. Yeah.
So proud of Bossy High School for sure.
Yeah.
And that takes care of good news. So if you will, Dr. Smith, take us through consent
All right.
items.
So let's dig into the actual board agenda. Item 3.02, consideration of the allowance of payments. So for this 2-week period of time, it was $10.7 million. And very typical, one payroll pay run in that 2-week period of time. $3.8 million in terms of invoices, and that's because we're finishing up some of the summertime construction projects. Moving on then to item 3.03, consideration approve the resolution transfer from the education fund to the operations fund. This is what we do on a quarterly basis because quite some time ago, the state changed how or what we could pay out of the education fund, but they still deposit our basic grant in the education fund, and then they require us to transfer money out of that into the operations fund where those expenses are now actually paid out of. Item 3.04, consideration to adopt the preliminary bond resolution and reimbursement resolution. So this is the general obligation bond of 2024. All of this really is brought to us from our legal counsel when it comes to financial matters. So this is part of the process that we have to go through when we engage in a general obligation bond. I think it's very important to know, though, that all of this is done within our existing tax structure. So taxes don't go up because of this. This is all done within our existing.
Yeah, I appreciate you
tax
lifting that because
structure.
sometimes that is an issue people don't quite understand, or
Certainly.
speculation about that. And as you dive into the next three, Dr. Smith, I know they're all about change orders at three different facilities. Could you tell us just briefly before you even start this, when you say change order, that comes up frequently. What do we mean when we say a change order as you're diving into these next three items?
So we're blessed to have great architects in town,
Sure.
great contractors in town, and there's a tremendous amount of planning that goes into this so that when we actually put a project out to bid,
Mhm.
we think that is going to be spot on in terms of what is
Sure.
needed.
Big or small.
Right. However, and I think the first one is a great example of this, consideration approved change order number 1 for Central High School
Mhm.
roofing project. After they've torn that roof off, then they discover areas that were only going to be discoverable after they removed the existing roofing service. In this particular case, there is a vertical structure where the wrestling part of the wrestling room is for Central High School as it abuts to the gym, and there was some deterioration, some leaking there. So that was not we were not able to discover that until we removed it. So then that change order for $11,737 was to put new decking, new plywood, and then to put uh, the material that would button it up to where there would not be any possibility of leaks in the future.
So that's a great example. Things you may not anticipate. You may anticipate some issues, but you don't
Right.
know exactly what they are until, like you
Right.
said, you get that roof off. So
And then item 3.06, consideration approved change order number 1 for Cedar Hall Community School Classroom and Quarter Remodel Project. So once again, this actually has something to do that was discovered on the exterior. There is a water retention uh, actually structure, if you will. It's right in the center of the driveway in the front of the school, and the grade we discovered was not sufficient according to the specs. So then they came in, had to regrade it, and then also when water does come off of the school and flow into that water retention area, sometimes it was getting clogged up with silt. So then there were some pavers that were put in so that would be easy to clean. And that change order was 15,483.
boy, just a lot of behind the scenes things to keep our facilities in tip top shape
Right.
that you wouldn't think about.
And then when you go back to Cedar Hall, that water ponding on that surface may not be that much of a challenge in the summer, but in the winter months,
With
if there's
freezing and thawing.
precipitation and then it freezes, then that creates a sheet of
Sure.
ice, and then it causes other issues that we can easily discern. Moving on then to item 3.07, this I think is another great example of you don't know what you may get into until after you remove something, but consideration approved change order number 1 for Bossy High School Stadium Turf Project of 2024. So after the turf was removed, we thought that we were going to have to replace all of the pressure treated lumber. that the turf is actually anchored to, but we found that there was a good portion of it that was in still great shape. So it did not have to be replaced. So here's where we deducted nearly $1,000 because we didn't have to replace all of that pressure treated lumber that actually serves as the anchor for the turf.
Okay, appreciate you sharing that then, because that is a change order. We do talk about that on these podcasts
Right.
frequently.
You bet. 3.08 consideration to approve the renewal with College Board. I think this is one of the outstanding services that we provide our students. So
Yeah.
we provide our eighth grade students as well as our freshmen free access to College Board Suite. So the PSAT 8-9, because we know through research that the more times a student takes the PSAT, which then becomes the SAT, the better they are at it. We provide that to them at no cost to the student or the families. The other important factor of this is that this also then allows each student to have a Khan Academy account, which is great for tutoring and extra work, extra help. So I appreciate the board's wisdom in allowing us to do this each and every year. Item 3.09, consideration approved proposed graduation times and dates for the end of this school year.
Surely not already we're thinking about
Already.
this. It
So
will be here before you know it.
I know you've said this so many times. It's important for our families to know when these dates and times are so that they can plan for that year-end
It is a big
celebration.
community event. I think last spring you even kind of estimated the number of attendees or spectators that were at these, and it was
Yeah.
just amazing how
I think
many
it's
people
about
were there.
20,000 people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I know they enjoyed every minute of it, so I hope
You
they can
bet.
all be there again this year.
Then next, 3.10, consideration approve the academic evaluator agreement. So we do this from time to time. School psychologists are difficult to come by. So this helps us with the work and the process that is involved with those assessments. So this is for a consultant for a contract not to exceed $15,000. And then finally, item 311, consideration to approve the professional services agreement with Amber Fisher. So this once again is a way to build the capacity to help us actually get some work done without bringing on the expense of another employee.
Okay, thank you for that, and then that takes us to personnel recommendations.
Yes, and as we say from time to time, those recommendations are there for your perusal. You can click on that and see the movement within EVSC. Two things I'd like to lift. Michael Schaus, who's been with us for a long time and coached many athletic activities, is going to be the Bossy head swim coach. And then also Molly Head Mackey is going to be the softball coach at Harrison.
Okay, and then we had 7 action items last night.
Yeah, so almost all of these have to do with financial requirements. So, item 5.01, permission to advertise a bus replacement plan. So, frequent listeners will know that the last board meeting, the bus replacement plan was presented to the board members formally in a meeting. Of course, we had shared that with board members previously, but this is now the next step in the process. So, the board did grant permission to advertise a bus replacement plan, and the same for 5.02. They did grant permission to advertise a capital projects plan, which is a 3-year plan of estimated work to be done in the next 3 years for our EVSC facilities. Then 5.03 and 5.04 are really grouped together as are 5.05 and 5.06. So consent item, as I mentioned earlier, 3.04 was consideration to adopt the preliminary bond resolution and reimbursement resolution. That just simply means, and I'm going back to the consent item, that simply means that the board did adopt that resolution. And then the reimbursement part of that is if we expend funds prior to receiving general obligation funds, then we can go back and reimburse ourselves for those expenses that are attributed to those projects. So now moving down to item 3.05, the public hearing on building projects for general obligation bonds. So this is or was the opportunity for the public to come and express their thoughts when it comes to the building projects. Uh, so it's important to note that we have those public hearings, and then after that, and that's not a question and answer type of thing, but we do want and by law want to accept
Yeah, it's an
public
opportunity
hearing.
for that
Right.
feedback.
And then after that, then we ask the board to adopt a resolution for the building projects. And then 5.05, 5.06 are all based upon site projects. So one may ask, what's the difference between a building project and a site project? So I think simply put, building projects are anything that goes on in terms of renovation within the building. So it could be roof, HVAC, floor, ceiling, lights, brick, masonry work, those type of things. Site projects are anything that would occur outside of the building. So it would be parking lots, those types of things, outdoor lighting for safety, those types of things, playground, all of that that occurs outside of that physical structure. So once again, we had the public hearing, and then we asked the board to adopt the project resolution for the site projects, and I am grateful that they did that.
Hmm.
And then finally, the last information item was consideration, or action item is 5.07, consideration to award the contract for the Academy of Innovative Studies for the boiler feed water improvement project of 2024. And Melissa Moorhead did say, so how often does this happen?
Mm-hmm.
AIS building has some age on it.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot remember ever taking a project like this to the board. So I don't think it happens very frequently, but this is basically a huge tank that holds water that then feeds our boilers. And unfortunately, it was starting to rust out at the bottom, and it was just something that we have to replace.
Absolutely. And for everything you just went through, as we say all the time, most of these have attachments. You can click on those and you can look into everything that you were talking about if you'd like more details about that and want to
Certainly
see the
can.
facts and figures. And then we had one information item.
Yes, so under information 6.01, consideration to approve updates to policy 6225, which is the employee job related expenses for travel, reimbursement, and cancellation. So, our chief of staff, Rick Cameron, is responsible for all of our policy updates to provide those recommendations to our board. All of that is based upon legal counsel as well as the Indiana School Board Association's guidance, based upon statute changes and other things that we see from time to time. This is certainly a result of clarification. And then when we're audited every year, the auditors suggested that we have a cancellation policy. We really didn't have many cancellations in the past and was not an issue, but
You never know. It can happen.
well, I think it's very prudent that if someone's going to go to a conference and it's canceled, or someone can't go to a conference and they've paid the fees, they're able to get those fees back because perhaps they're ill or something like
Sure.
that. We just needed to make certain that we put in policy the expectations. And then also, I think there was some clarification that our employees are to submit receipts and all that for reimbursement within a 45-day period
Yes.
of time. Once again, in the audit process, there were not issues, but they did make those recommendations. It would be good to have a policy. It's a very thorough audit. They review our policies, all of our expenditures, contracts, things like that. And, while we haven't had an issue, we want to make certain that we don't have issues. So I think this is a very proactive approach to that. And that was really all that we had for the board meetings. I do want to lift one thing, though. There are so many opportunities for the public to interface and interact with their board and with schools. In a previous conversation that you and I had today, we have the contact us feature on our website.
Yeah.
Tell us how many individuals actually.
We
take
actually,
advantage of that.
between our district website and all of our school websites, we get about 200 a month on average. So it's just another opportunity for people to reach out when they have a question, a concern, anything. Those can be answered by any number of us or directed to the schools where they can get an answer. So again, it's just a quick, easy, convenient way for people to reach out, which is great.
And I just wanted to lift that because I do think that's a great feature that I don't believe we really discussed before.
No, I don't know that we had.
Another outstanding feature, and I was talking to a previous superintendent, been superintendent in Indiana and Illinois for about 20 years. And this happened to be on the day of the board meeting, and he asked what my day was looking like. I said, well, we have a board meeting tonight, and then with executive session, he said, and then our town hall. And he said, town hall, well, tell me about that. And I said, well, that's an opportunity for our patrons to come in and have a one-on-one conversation with 3 board members.
Sit right across the table from them.
That's amazing. He said, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
I said, our community has a lot of opportunity to interact with board members. So there's the contact us. There's the what we call the town hall opportunity for people to come in, sit down right across the table from board member, have their questions answered. uh, certainly public comment. We also have this board recap. All of our board members' emails and phone numbers are published on our website. So there is a tremendous amount of access to board members if the public is so inclined to ask
And we
questions.
never lose sight of the fact we serve the public, and we want to be able to provide them with answers to their
We
questions. So,
absolutely do.
and last thing before we leave, Dr. Smith, I know in continued business last night you did lift Stacy Mauser. I didn't know if you'd want to say just one thing about her before we wrap up today.
Well, I appreciate that. As we're recording this, Stacy is coming to the end of her 28-year career with us, and for
Right,
12 of those years, she has been our chief technology officer.
right.
She has done such a phenomenal job. She even helped us all remember that in the early days of the internet, we had schools that could use the internet on Monday and Wednesday,
That's
and then
true.
other schools that could use it on Tuesday and
Right,
Thursday.
right,
Nobody could use it on Friday because that's kind of when central office was going to use it.
right.
And the amount of bandwidth that we had then was is still far less than what common ordinary households have now.
Yes.
So I think that's just how far we've come, and she's done such a great job of being proactive, of putting us in a position to be successful, that now it's somewhat like electricity used to be 100+ years
Right.
ago. We flip the switch and we just
Yeah.
expect it to
You
be
take it
there.
for granted
Right.
almost, but a lot of work behind the scenes to make that happen.
And now, because of Stacy and all of our IT department, all of our telephones run over the internet. Our
Right.
computers certainly do. Our HVAC systems, our
Right.
access control. So it is so important that it is a reliable system and that we have enough bandwidth to do all the work that we need to do. So I appreciate her. I wish her well and much joy and happiness in the next
Right.
phase of her life in retirement, and just want her and everybody to know how blessed we have been to have her services.
Well said. So thank you for sharing that. And thanks for sharing all this information. We appreciate it, Dr.
You
Smith.
bet. My pleasure. Thank you.